Good evening. I'm Peter Thiel.
Imagine
A podcast.
where time drifts slowly,
A podcast.
Where
Isaac
carries you away.
So let me be clear. We tortured some folks.
If you don't like what we tell you to believe in, we'll kill you.
Did you know that Peter Thiel almost died on 9/11? That's right, we almost missed out on this wonderful techno-reich we find ourselves in. Shout out to Clonny Gosh for pointing this one out. According to the book, The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power, as PayPal was preparing to file to go public, Thiel traveled to New York with Chief Financial Officer Rolef Botha for a meeting with bankers from Morgan Stanley. It was September 10th, 2001. The meeting that afternoon was a total failure. PayPal confused the bankers. Was it a technology company or an unlicensed bank? They wanted to know, and neither man cut an especially impressive figure. Surprise, surprise. Thiel was a 33-year-old conservative political wannabe. Botha was, at 27, absurdly young and inexperienced for a public company CFO. The Morgan Stanley bankers indicated they weren't interested, and Thiel and Botha took a car to JFK International Airport in the rain, feeling dejected. Their sense of misery grew when their plane, the last United flight of the day, was delayed for hours on the tarmac. Eventually, the crew offered passengers the option to disembark and take a morning flight. But Thiel and Botha opted to sit grimly and wait while several passengers elected to get off. They eventually made it home to San Francisco very early the next morning. Hours later, Thiel learned that a San Francisco-bound United aircraft from Newark Airport, flight number UA-93, had been hijacked and had crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. It seemed possible that at least some of the people they'd been with the night before were now dead. Is Peter Thiel the Antichrist? What a bullet to dodge. If this is true, what a strange timeline we live in, huh? Isn't it also strange that another member of the Trump administration... Okay, I know Thiel is not technically in the administration, but we all know that he's got his hand way up in JD's ass and is talking through his mouth. Howard Lutnick, our current Secretary of Commerce and former head of Cantor Fitzgerald, he also survived 9/11 somehow. He was supposed to be in his offices, I think in the first tower, and he just missed it that day for some reason. I think he had like a doctor's appointment or something, or he was going to his kid's Little League game. I can't remember the exact story. I don't think he can keep it straight either, but he was supposed to die on 9/11, and he did not. A lot of his employees did, and he stole their money, apparently. Yeah, what a strange time we live in. Is Peter Thiel the Antichrist? That's the question for today, and to help me figure that out, I am joined by Dorian, also known as Dank Deleuze, and we get into Peter Thiel's philosophy and theology after that very bizarre Ross Douthat interview that he did. For those of you who aren't subscribed to the podcast, that's okay. That's all right. If you wouldn't mind, I have my show broadcasting under No Exist Inc. That's N-O Exist Inc. If you wouldn't mind going to like Apple and Spotify, liking, subscribing, commenting, get those algorithmic juices flowing for your boy. Otherwise, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
I hate Antichrist. I hate the Antichrist. I hate the son of a bitch. I hate Antichrist.
We're gonna do a quick introduction here because I'm putting this thing up tomorrow. I don't want to edit it, so normally I would talk a little bit ahead of time, just doing my thing. But instead, hey, hello. Wait, try one more time.
What's up?
I have a little thing I do. I go, hey, hi, hello. That's my like new thing. I don't know if anybody likes it or not, but that's like what I've been doing. So hey, hi, hello. It's Isaac. Welcome to Coexist Inc. Immediately getting into things. I'm joined today by Dorian, a.k.a. Dank Deleuze. Do you still like being called Dank Deleuze, by the way? Or does that feel like you're like, you don't want that anymore? Do you wish it was something else?
No, that still works for me. I'm stuck in a weird kind of superpositional state where I'd like to be known by my real name, but also my main marketing is definitely still Danktalas. So, I'll take both.
That's where I'm at with the fucking gluten daddy. I really
Right.
I don't want it, but it's just it's my forever marker. I don't know what to do.
I feel like that has a higher higher recognizability for people too than even coexist, despite the stickers and whatnot. Because every time that I talk about like, oh, I'm going on to a podcast. Oh, which podcast? Oh, I'm going on to a coexist. Which one's that? The gluten daddy thing. Oh, yeah, of course.
Shit. God damn it. I hate it so. It's such a curse. It's such a curse. Whatever. I made my bed. I'm sleeping in it. But speaking of monikers that should forever be branded upon the foreheads of individuals, the Antichrist. We're talking about the Antichrist and whether Peter Thiel may or may not be it or whatever the Antichrist is exactly, because I'm kind of confused on what the Antichrist is. I have spoken in the past about Peter Thiel's job as the captain behind the surveillance state, the coming surveillance state, with his Palantir ghoulish business, his associations with Epstein. We're not going to get into Peter Thiel's life per se, about how he likes to throw ex-boyfriends off of balconies, allegedly, or that he was born in Germany to a probably a Nazi named Klaus Thiel.
No.
Who also, it was working in apartheid South Africa, where Peter Thiel lived for a brief time, and then went to basically like Nazi land, Namibia, and did mining there as well. So we're not going to get into that. That's not what this episode is about.
No.
This episode is about the philosophy and the theology of Peter Thiel. And so the other night, I took advantage of Dorian when he was drunk, and I asked him if he had read Peter Thiel's The Straussian Moment, and you said no. But I made you
did.
look into it. What was that like?
It's not long, but it was something that I had to try to dive into twice. I mean, drunk or not, I'm an expert drunk reader, so that surely was not getting in the way.
I'm an expert drunk driver. I get it. Yeah.
I mean, my drunk reading surely hurts more people. But it's a bizarre text. And I think that the main difficulty in reading through it is trying to determine what he's doing, or what the goal is. And I mean, at any one individual point, it seems evident enough, like it's clear from the very beginning that this is some type of neoconservative reaction at the time. He's doing some kind of flirtation, at the very least, with illiberalism, and that it all has this kind of weird, 17th century Christian thing going on with it, but looking for discrete arguments is something that's kind of difficult even as you get to the end. So the reading is hard.
Let's contextualize it a little bit first, because the essay was originally written in 2004, and so that's before social media, before I believe he was an angel investor in Facebook,
and it was published in 2007.
Yes,
or the weird 3-year gap. That's really
I've seen writings that it was 2004. It was published. Let me double check this. Really
Okay.
quickly. Some live time fact checking for the fans. Straussian. I'm typing with one finger each right now.
It's beautiful packing, yeah.
Right. Well, so it says in the Internet Archive that it's a 2007 essay. I did see 2004, but either way, still before. I mean, he was an angel investor in Facebook probably around this time. He had
Right.
he had already dipped out of PayPal because remember, this is Peter Thiel's great contribution to the world is PayPal, which even in its early forms was. One thing I will say about Peter Thiel is he's pretty fucking consistently evil. He didn't pretend to be anything he wasn't. I think he was always pretty open about what he wanted out of his life, which very early on with his PayPal boys that he all recruited from the same conservative media or newspaper he started in Stanford was to rule the world. He has said this explicitly, to take over the world. So you can't accuse him of being a phony in that regard. So it's 2007. He at this point is running Palantir, which was basically gifted to him, or the power and money of Palantir was gifted to him by the CIA venture capital organization called In-Q-Tel. And so this is the context in which this essay is being written. So tell me your initial reactions to this Straussian moment, because people still refer back to this essay by Peter Thiel as somehow seminal in his philosophy.
Right. So I would say a couple things. First off, just kind of bouncing off what I was saying before, where it's difficult to kind of find its prescriptions as you read. It's doing that on purpose, right? That's something that Leo Strauss argues for in his work, is trying to kind of sneak in political messages into more mainstream writing for revolutionary causes. So the style that he's kind of using is, I would refer to it as like philosophical mood boarding or historical mood boarding, where he's just kind of pasting together the philosophy of various people and describing their historical moments and not doing too much of the work to describe why they matter, why they connect, and what kind of ongoing argument is supposed to be taken from it, right? But what happens in the text as a whole is that there's this, be it 3 years or 6 years, this weird festering that has happened post 9/11 for him, where he has become really paranoid and concerned about the Islamic world in particular. And so he is describing the history of essentially, Western Christian civilization and talking about how essentially because of the 30 Years' War and whatnot, that we have come to find it too distasteful to have real discussions about politics and religion. And so we can't handle some kind of an outside attack from another religion now because we've become too polite, I guess, is his fundamental claim. And we all know that none of us are Islamophobic at this point in time because of the fact that we're too polite to other cultures. We are too tolerant to them.
Yeah, that rings true to me for sure. We're super chill with Islam in this country. Always have been.
Right. And then he bounces around a lot, just kind of, I guess, building up that idea for the vast majority of the text. But occasionally getting into Strauss and doing this whole melancholy anti-modernism stuff, which is far from interesting in my mind. But then he gets into fucking Schmidt. And
Carl Schmitt.
is Carl Schmitt.
Who, and to the listeners, because I know Carl Schmitt like the back of my hand, but could you tell us more about this Carl Schmitt?
Okay, so Schmitt is someone who Well, even before I get into it, I will just say that in like a 25-page paper, though he's only referenced through sections of it, Thiel brings him up either directly or for secondary sources at least 18 times.
Yeah, I
Right.
saw that when I when I first opened up the Straussian moment. I looked at the bibliography and I was just like, "Whoa!" Like one page is just like all Schmidt in a row.
It's
like,
it's
you
a
just, like,
mess.
That's some Dershowitz style citations right there.
And ultimately, so if we're going to be, I'll kind of do both approaches, where I'll be generous and then direct. But the generous reading of Schmidt is that he's essentially making arguments about sovereignty. It's the decision of exceptions, of the use of authority in order to suspend law, not necessarily the induction of law as such that ends up producing kind of power or has any real meaning. Of course, that connecting into things like security state and these concerns post 9/11. The most important thing for Schmidt really being like the friend enemy distinction as being something that is really the core of all politics, where you end up identifying an enemy, and then you gain your capacity to act politically through that, and that's the core of it all, and that's part of what makes liberalism so flawed, because the fact that it is legally rich, but it doesn't have the ability to suspend its own laws per Schmidt. In short, he's a Nazi.
I was waiting for
And
that. I was waiting for that because I know he is. I mean, this is Peter Thiel. One thing he likes to say about himself is that it's his job to predict the future, which is interesting. How much predicting he's doing versus how much he's just straight up influencing it and guiding it or pushing it in certain directions. But Carl Schmitt, he became kind of a figure of the neo-reactionary right many years after the fact. So he did at least predict this character would become fashionable in these pseudo-intellectual circles.
Yeah, and also when I'm talking about him being a Nazi, I'm not just calling him a Nazi in the colloquial kind of sense. I mean, he joined the Nazi Party in 1933. He was joining the Nazi Party largely as an attempt to provide legal justification for Hitler's power, right? So that was like one of his primary motivations, is maintaining and establishing power for Hitler. So Schmidt is not just a Nazi, he's a Nazi, right?
No, you just haven't. You don't understand, dude. It's more complicated than that. It's actually subtle. Just to call him a Nazi is to dismiss him and his salient points.
And it's funny, not to get myself in trouble again, but frequently I'm willing to read a whole lot of authors who are complicated and who people will do a lot of mudslinging of this sort, justified and otherwise, usually justified to some degree, and then, pecking around and finding the useful bits. But it is unavoidable for us to talk about the fact that Schmidt is a Nazi. It's the extremely important part of his philosophy, and it is a fundamental result of his critique of liberalism and the neutrality that it brings, the legalism that it brings, and his justification for, and this is really important for Thiel, his justification for this idea of exception is that it parallels the idea of the miracle, right? So this is a theological concept. It's this idea, much like with the monarchs, that sovereignty is an echo of God's omnipotence, and so a dictator is also a king for Schmidt, is an extension of God, is a holy monarch, or at least, if not literally that, a reflection of or iteration of that. And that's extremely important for Thiel in the way that he ends up thinking, or at least communicating.
And there's one more philosopher that Thiel quotes very heavily in the Straussian moment, and his name is René Girard,
Yes.
who is at least not a Nazi as far as I know. He's French, could be Vichy, but no.
No, he's just a liberal Catholic. Either or they refer to him as liberal Catholic. It could also just be a conservative of some form. But yeah, I mean, the Girard part is the part that I found the most interesting. So that this is what produces the conclusion of the paper. So most of the paper up until this point is just kind of waffling around with this quasi to pseudo historical kind of comments, shitting on Locke and talking about Schmidt, blah blah blah. But for Girard, the fundamental idea that's really important for most of Girard's work, as well as for Thiel, is the idea that desire is imitative or mimetic. So what that means is that you see that someone else wants something, and that's what produces your desire. And that through this, rivalry ends up developing, and in this crisis and the violence that results from rivalry, you end up having to produce scapegoats or sacrifices or some form of violence, which ends up kind of historicizing the violence and then afterwards producing things like taboo and religion as such in order to avoid more of that violence. And I guess the fundamental idea, well, just really quick, just to get into the real literal religious portion of this, because again, this all matters a lot for Thiel and certainly matters a lot for Girard, is, if you're looking at stories in the Bible like, Cain and Abel, or the crucifixion, obviously, is that you are talking about versions of human violence in order to produce some kind of scapegoat which solves a problem despite being the wrong thing to do. And then culture kind of forms around that, and that the crucifixion of Christ ultimately ends up kind of unveiling this, and we all see that the victim all along throughout all of history has always been, or has largely been, innocent, and that this violence is generally done to people who weren't in fact asking for it. So it's kind of woke in a way.
Yeah.
But what Thiel does is he kind of applies this idea, and then, as far as I can tell, doesn't do anything useful with the Christian part of it, despite that being kind of the culmination of his idea, where he talks about, of course, the importance of mimetic violence and rivalry and mimetic desire being, this problem of globalism and, again, the Muslims or whatever. But it's, I guess his main concern is that because the fact that we've become aware of scapegoating, right? Because we are potentially aware that the people that will die are people that do not deserve it, because of this kind of both the theology of Christianity. He doesn't say that, I don't think, but because of liberalism and because of kind of experience, that we're no longer able to produce these cultural frameworks that make it so that we can stop the violence from happening, ironically. The innocent have to die because we can't make them out to be bad anymore.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I will say a running theme here and what you just alluded to was the relative weakness of his Christian arguments. I find his faith to be highly questionable, and even his understanding of Christian theology is quite thin. And we'll get into that with his interview with Ross Douthat, and how Ross mogged the hell out of him.
God is not causing everything. If you say God's causing everything,
but God is. But wait,
that's,
but God
that's,
is.
you're scapegoating God.
But God is
You're
behind. Oh,
scapegoating
okay,
God.
but God is behind Jesus Christ entering history because God was not going to leave us in a stagnationist, decadent Roman Empire, right? So at some point. At some point, God is going to step in.
I'm not
right?
I am not that Calvinist, and
that's not Calvinism, though. That's just Christianity
with like really simple components of Christianity. But let's get back to the Straussian moment again. What's your conclusion? I mean, you're a teacher. How would you grade this paper? If it was a freshman, you'd be like, "That's not bad. That's a good try." Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that it is actually like an interesting experiment in like Straussian style, if you're generous to it, where he's saying things without saying them. He's kind of bearing the lead as part of a political project. But then the problem is that I think he's trying to when he attempts to make a conclusion, he just seems to start stacking things that don't necessarily fit together onto one another. And in a paper that's already, as I kind of said, a mood board more than anything else, the whole thing kind of comes together as being at best disorganized and kind of without connective tissue, and at worst kind of incomprehensible.
Not fun to read, honestly. I was just like, oh, what a slog this is.
The first 20 of the 25 pages were just extraordinarily boring.
Yeah. I would be such a terrible professor because I feel like I would pick favorites because I would like get a vibe for who my students are. And I'm like, this guy's annoying. So I'm going to read his paper knowing that he's an annoying person or whatever. I couldn't read the Straussian moment without knowing who Peter Thiel is. And the fact that he does such a funny bit of history about 9/11 itself, considering the fact that this guy knows who did 9/11 by 2007, he fucking knows what the truth is. Are you kidding me? And so for him to really do this sort of almost like Sam Harris level interpretation of 9/11, which is just that you have these extremists that are new to this kind of like to modernity, and we can't use these old tools to address it, and now we need something different, and that goes against this the like 20th century's basically pussiness is what it seems like he's upset about. Knowing full well that it's like, motherfucker, you inherited the deep state that did this. So your entire like theory is based on a lie, and you know that lie, I would assume.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you think about, and neither of us want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but you think about his actual business projects, like PayPal being the primary one that's always brought up. And the primary thing that something like that ends up accomplishing, theoretically, is the globalization of finance and the kind of melting of boundaries in those terms. And yet it is globalization and the inability to kind of suspend or inoculate or sequester that is his purportedly primary political concern, and so his political project and his business projects are seemingly at odds, at least on kind of a fundamental level, right? I would say, though, that I mean that's fundamental to how capital works, right? Is capital only ever melts boundaries? It constantly is deterritorializing and reterritorializing things. So if you want to get into finance, the best thing for you is to go ahead and melt these things down as much as you can. Of course, like different forms of suspension or regulation in different zones will make it so that you're able to sap economic power out of other areas. And so, of course, it can't be a flat kind of space for people like this in order to make their money. But he in no way wants us to be genuinely like isolationist. He doesn't want the same kind of security state that he seems to argue for, at least if you look at the type of businesses that he ends up producing. But I guess the money makes its choices, then he makes his.
Yeah, I think that's what I kind of want to parse out in this episode is how much does he mean what he says?
Right.
Because he does seem to hint at it. And again, there are some consistencies throughout at least some of the videos or as long as I've been familiar with him and what little I know of his biography. He's a lot harder to psychoanalyze than someone like Elon. Although I'd like to do a little bit of that just because I'm sure people have seen some clips from the Ross Douthat interview that Peter Thiel did. And Peter Thiel has made the rounds on lots of shows on Joe Rogan, and he is bad at speaking.
So what do you think about the use of artificial intelligence or lavender by the IDF in identifying Hamas targets?
Look, I'm not, without going into all the I'm not on top of all the details of what's going on in Israel because my bias is to defer to Israel. It's not for us to second guess everything, and I believe that broadly the IDF gets to decide what it wants to do, and that they're broadly in the right, and that's sort of the perspective I come back to. And if I fall into the trap of arguing you on every detailed point, I would actually be conceding the broader issue that the Middle East should be micromanaged from Cambridge, and I think that's just simply absurd. And so I'm not going to concede that point. And what was the other?
He's really bad at talking.
Yeah.
And I wonder why he does this. Like, why are you continuing to blemish your reputation with these terrible interviews? Or maybe his poor speaking is what people find compelling about him, being like, he sounds so fucking stupid, he must be a genius,
Yeah.
Like that kind of logic.
But remember that today's commencement is not the beginning of one more thing that will end. It is the beginning of forever. And I won't delay you any further in getting on with it. Thank you.
I think that's it. He has this kind of twitchy awkwardness and kind of a difficulty expressing things that I think a lot of people end up reading as his mind is just moving so fast, his mouth can't keep up. You know.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I love that logic. Your brain just working over, and that's the thing. You read the Straussian moment, and you're just kind of like, meh. It just doesn't come across as a particularly brilliant man to me.
No, he comes off as is like a precocious bachelor's student. Like
Yes.
that's what it comes off as, and not to focus on his educational history, because like who wants to fucking just talk about college? But he got his BA in philosophy, and then went on to get a JD, and that's ultimately what ended up leading him into going into business. Now, it's not unusual to use a philosophy bachelor's in order to go into law.
I think it's pretty common, actually. Yeah.
It is really common. Like I think, generally speaking, the people that I knew that were going into law were either they were doing some kind of specifically pre-law thing, or they were English or philosophy people. But I don't know, that trajectory reads to me as both being kind of a pragmatic thing, but it could also read a little bit as a kind of a having a fundamental interest in being able to communicate ideas, and then realizing you can't do them in this creative kind of, emancipatory is exactly the wrong word, but for himself, emancipatory kind of way, and then realizing that from there you just have to do something practical. You have to make the money, and maybe that was the goal all along. But there's this kind of desire buried in there somewhere to be like, oh, I want to be like a philosopher. I want to be philosopher king. I want to be like all of these different like fun creative things. Like I've always wanted to write the great American novel, but too bad I started $1 million business,
Yeah. I want to be a DJ. I want to be a fucking celebrity. That's what it feels like. And that's why I think he keeps subjecting himself to these embarrassing interviews, just because he likes the attention. And that's why I think we all know the Thiel Bucks thing, that as much as these people like to deny it, it's quite clear that this is what's going on, is he's throwing money at these contrarian cool kids. And that's kind of, I wanted to talk to you about this. It feels like we're in this age of contrarianism. We're not, maybe we're this is post irony, it's contrarianism, which I think is different than irony somehow, and it's also different than absurdism. Like contrarianism feels like a nefarious absurdism to me. It's these exercises.
It's absurdism that masquerades as rationalism.
Yes, that's a really good way to put it. And so he seems to be playing with these ideas, and that seems to be his guiding philosophy to me. Not libertarianism like he has claimed, or he really infiltrated the libertarian movement for quite some time. And now, being a Christian is his big thing right now, which is also fake as far as I can tell. Like there's just no way he's an actual Christian, and we'll get into that some more as well. What did you think of the Ross Douthat interview, which is everyone's making fun of right now?
It's weird to watch something that makes Douthat seem fundamentally rational
and look normal too by comparison. Like if you don't know what Ross Douthat looks like, I mean, he's like a child painted their father on a potato, like he's such a bizarre looking carbuncle. If I could say.
He looks like the JD Vance memes.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He has that physiognomy. And yet, this video, you can watch Peter Thiel and Ross talk. If you look at Peter Thiel's melting face, his shiny, like reptile skin. Which, by the way, did you know that Peter Thiel is an anagram of the reptile?
Reptile.
Isn't that
The
crazy?
reptile.
Isn't
That's
that
perfect.
fucking crazy? Like, what?
Man, we gotta get Nick Land in on this to do some gematria and to turn him against the other neo-reactionaries.
You just have to
we
take
gotta
the
work on this
mantle.
project.
You just have to take the Nick Land mantle. Nick Land's
Oh,
far
no.
too gone at this point, brother.
Yeah.
The meth takes its toll on you. You know, his
Yeah.
his golden years are over. He's Jordan on the Wizards. You know.
And sadly, it's not even just that meth takes a toll on you. It seems like quitting meth takes a toll on you.
Yeah, you can't stop. You have to just do tiny little doses.
It's all or
here and
nothing,
there.
baby.
Forever and ever. or you blow your brains out in a bunker like the real meth heads do. But yeah, Peter Thiel looks weird and he stutters like crazy, and they're in person, but they're talking to each other like they have a Zoom lag. There is no rhythm to the conversation, and you can see them. Both of them are bad at this. They cannot finish a thought without trying to add something as someone is beginning to respond to it, and it just is such a terrible flow of a conversation.
Yeah, and there are a lot of, even with that, there are so many like spooky silences that happen, and Douthat ends up mentioning that a couple times where, you know, in particular when he ends up asking Thiel whether or not he's like pro-human.
Would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
I guess. Or worse than pro-human, whether or
should
not
humanity should humanity survive? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Whether or not humanity should in fact continue. And I don't know how long that pause is, but it's long enough that Douthat seems to start getting nervous and is mentioning it a few times.
Well, maybe Peter Thiel's trying to think of something clever to say instead of just the political, diplomatic, yes, of course. And then you can say, but. Instead, I think because he embodies this cool, edgy contrarianism, he needs to say something of that nature. And he's just not quick enough to do that.
Yeah, and it's also working off of, you know, he has this urge to be contrary, but also he's trying to find a way to not say, I don't care. I think.
Yeah. So the main topics of this conversation with Douthat are, I'd say, transhumanism, stagnation.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, stagnation is definitely a big one, and the Antichrist. I think those were the main subjects at hand. So let's talk about the first one.
Yeah, I mean, his ideas there are exactly what you'd expect a tech guy to be, you know? It's this idea that we used to build fucking railroads, but his version of that keeps on being the Manhattan Project. And so we used to build, you know, mega weapons. And now what are we doing? Much like he ends up saying in his, I think it was his CPAC speech, where it was, you know, we used to have huge weapons companies when I moved to the U.S., and now we have jets that can't fly in the rain.
Yeah, that line that was like,
yeah. Where his primary concern is just that, you know, we're not moving technology forward enough, but invariably his version of technological progress has to do with war. And of course that is a huge kind of motor of technological progress. Whether or not that's good or not is its own question. Spoiler, probably not. But and it's interesting that he's not necessarily talking about, you know, the developments in technology that come through from things like NASA, or from, which of course is linked to weapons, but is not necessarily inherently, or to things like, you know, biochemists working for the government in labs just working on, you know, like cancer research or things like that have produced quite a lot of excellent science over the years that is not motivated around murdering other people. So it's not like technology is stagnated. It's just that, you know, I guess the type of technology that he wants is stagnated. Culture has stagnated, which is certainly kind of true. But that's more his type of fault than anything. That's capital's fault. I don't want to go on a Fisher thing. But
he blames it on Greta Thunberg. He blames,
of course,
which I gotta say, when he basically implied that Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist.
The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
That was just Dasha and Anna talking right there. He's got that Red Scare sort of shock and awe, contrarian, like, where the fuck is this like crazy idea coming from? And like the justifications for it are slim.
And Douthat's response to it is so salient and normal.
Yeah, like, are you fucking crazy?
Yeah, he essentially says that, and he says it by saying, wait, but isn't she currently like in a barge, like talking about climate and fucking Gaza right now? She doesn't seem to be like, you know, in power, and also brings up, you know, the fact that and thank you, Doubt That. I never thought I'd hear something like this from you, but that environmentalists don't have that much fucking power. You know, like, certainly not nearly as much as you would like. But Thiel's response is essentially that and this is a huge departure from his Strauss paper, but that the primary religion of Europe isn't Islam, as if anyone thought that genuinely, but that it's environmentalism. It's green. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, he said that basically there are three options to believe in, but he said it was in Europe and not America, which is also funny. Doubt That points out that Europe is a very weak continent today, a very weak cultural, political player. Thiel says, yeah, you can either believe in Sharia law, Chinese totalitarianism, or green, is how he put it. Which is just like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's yeah.
And the part of that makes sense in a backwards way is the fact that Thiel is pointing out through that liberals don't believe in anything, and he's also applying that to all of American culture, which is certainly true for him as well. I mean, someone doesn't, though it happens a lot, nobody transitions from neoconservatism, especially in 2007, into libertarian seasteading if they think that they are being consistent with the person they were a year ago. I mean, it's okay for people to change their philosophies. I certainly have a lot over the years, but he is, as long as he is, again, contrary, and as long as he is making his money, he's willing to, I think, believe anything he can. You know, like someone asking for usually indirectly, but asking for a Christian dictatorship who is a homosexual who wants to live on an oil rig in the South Pacific or whatever, and has dual citizenship in New Zealand for his fucking apocalypse bunker, is not someone who has real core beliefs that are internally consistent, at one point in time, let alone continuously. And that is because he is a great example of a person that is part of American culture. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe he's right that the only three religions you can have are Chinese totalitarianism, Sharia law, or green.
Why not all three,
There's nothing here.
Why can't we have all three at once? That sounds like a good one.
I mean, you can only pick two.
Oh.
You can only pick two.
Yeah,
what do you pick?
It's Chinese totalitarianism and green, I guess. I like alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't want to not drink,
I do think Chinese totalitarian Sharia law is really funny, though.
Dude, the aesthetics would go hard. It would look so good. It would look You heard it. You heard it. If you're listening, President Xi, give it a whirl. Give it a whirl. Yeah, I think one of the things you can look into with some of his beliefs, they are obviously all self-serving, which makes me immediately take. If everything you believe serves you, you're not to be taken seriously as a thinker. I believe.
Yeah.
And one of the things with Peter Thiel's obsession with stagnation, which is also, it's not true. Like the notion that we are technologically stagnant is not true, and the ways in which we are all because of private equity and capital. That's the only reason why things aren't advancing. That's why things suck right now, because of people like him. But he emphasizes a lot, and throughout a lot of talks he's been on, dementia research. He seems to be particularly concerned about dementia, which makes me think maybe his father has dementia or has a family history of dementia.
Maybe he has dementia.
Maybe. I mean, the way he's talking, maybe. I don't know. So he's very mad that they haven't fixed it yet, even though we have made incredible progress on all these things. Not to mention the fact that Peter Thiel has benefited from them. I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to get into a vaccine debate or whatever, but like, if you take warp speed at face value, like they did something remarkable. They made a mRNA vaccine at an incredible clip and then distributed it globally, which is kind of an incredible feat when you see what like can be done when the government decides to get its shit together. Not to mention that Peter Thiel, even though he likes to throw Fauci under the bus whenever he can these days, benefited pretty enormously from his dealings with the CDC. And he basically has all of your biometric data that you like. He knows what vaccines you got and when. Let's put it that way, because of Palantir. So for him to bitch about that shit is just like so insincere.
Yeah, and you know his main one of his main points when he's talking about this stagnation is that the stagnation has not necessarily taken place in the world of bits, right? It's only happening in, well, he doesn't use this term, at least nowhere that I've heard, but in meat space, right? That this stagnation has happened. And I mean, if you care so much about that, then maybe don't work in the world of bits. You know, I guess that he's encouraging other people to do other kind of work, but he's also funding primarily people who are working in the abstract or with tech, and again, tech as in digital tech. So
yeah, because it's easy bullshit. Software is easy bullshit. Like culture war is easy bullshit. Right. Medicine is very difficult. So of course, you know, he's betting, and he's betting on winning dogs. You know, that's a losing horse to bet on medicine because it doesn't work out so well usually, or it takes a lot more investment. In fact, it takes state level investment, not a little, you know, techie billionaire guy.
Yeah. It's also interesting the way that with that, he talks about things like AI and this kind of transhumanism, because at least in the Douthat interview, he ends up saying things that hint at more of a desire to, maintain the existence of the body. He explicitly ends up saying that he wants to maintain his body. He doesn't want to just be put up in the cloud.
That was really interesting that he likes whole, dude. What can you blame him? He likes whole. So
you said it.
So the gay sex is gonna he's gonna create some gay sex cyborg is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I think
this
I
is
think
a
maybe one
Peter
of the
Thiel
things,
level pause, by the way. We're going through
because I'm just making shit up.
Yeah.
No, I think maybe one of the reasons that he ends up liking tech is, the same reason a lot of people do, and it's something that ends up leading kind of inherently to fascism. Not saying that there aren't like anarcho tech people. I know very many of them, but it's this idea that you can end up producing something that is sequestrable, and you are able to produce exception at a moment's notice, and you are able to kind of modify it and stop redistribution within a system, that any kind of network you can kind of just break off any one point of it. Whereas in reality, as much as you can embargo and cut people's benefits or whatever the fuck, you actually can't do that much, especially inside of like a giant state like the U.S. And so the constant movement and redistribution, it's as much as they are doing, and as much as they are succeeding in making sure that people don't get the things that they need, people still have autonomy over their bodies. And people can still do things within space that you can't control.
Like assassinations.
Like assassinations, for example.
Just a random, apropos of nothing example. Yeah.
The collection of nitrogen, very easy for the average person. Whatever the use would be, who knows? But whereas you could just chop that shit off in bit space. And so it is his kind of opportunity to have this kind of Moldbugian patchwork universe where, Meta's its state and Palantir's its state and PayPal's its state, which all want to be global. And so there's this kind of layering patchwork rather than a geographical one. But that's, he wants to be a god king of his own little empire. That's it. I mean, reductionist, but that's it.
What I find so unconvincing about this stagnation nonsense too is it's obviously because they're so used to, because Peter Thiel is a hedge fund guy, because he's in equity, private equity markets, they're used to this like perpetual shareholder growth. They're used to this concept of growth as this like linear line that only moves up, which is not how the universe works. Progress is not a linear line. And so when you don't get that, when that linear line like tops off, because you can only zoom in so far into a molecule, right? That there are these limitations, these physical limitations to our understandings of things. But what's most disappointing, and you see this especially in the Straussian moment too, because he talks about 9/11, which of course is like this post-Soviet moment where we have a new global like philosophical culture war that he longs for. But pretending to long for a Soviet era technological arms race when China is right fucking there is crazy to me. It's like you want to compete with somebody, compete with China on green energy, on like technology that actually will prevent this earth from being annihilated. But instead, we manufacture these civilizational clashes, and we get Christian evangelical annihilation narratives. So I don't even believe in this theory that Thiel proposes of stagnation, because what are his references for why we're not at where we should be? Because of the movie Back to the Future and the Jetsons, and we don't have flying cars. That's literally his logic. He points to those things being like, it's 2025, and why don't we have flying cars? Maybe because cars are a terrible way to get around in general. Like, have you ever think of that?
Right.
That cars are just like actually bad technology?
Or just the idea that flying cars has always been a retarded idea.
It's such a bad idea. Can you imagine
3-dimensional car crashes? Yeah. Rules.
Like a car crash happening not outside on your street, but on top of your fucking roof. Like,
right.
So stupid.
An 18 car pile up on top of your house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things with the stagnation stuff that might be a little in the weeds and off in another kind of direction, but it's that, things like the economy, and sorry to be this like materialist type of guy, but things like the economy, or things like a hurricane, or things like an organism, these are all, in my mind, dissipative systems.
What's that?
And
What's a dissipative system?
A dissipative system is in thermodynamic terms, it's open. So it's including energy and matter and expending it into its environment. And so it's constantly in interaction with its environment in order to build itself up. And the patterns that these things end up displaying look just like the stock market, right? Where they increase for a period and then they crash, and then they increase for a period and they crash. That's the fundamental kind of model of a dissipative system, is this kind of loop, but it keeps on extremizing itself until it kind of like burns out. And so you need to produce really, like metabolically rich, or in other terms, like, productively rich in economies, situations, so that you can have it crash, so that you can have more growth from the bottom again. It's just kind of how the system is working, and it's how people like at hedge funds, who are predicating so much of their money off of, things like short selling, or changes in the use of leverage and derivatives and all this, they're manipulating the fact that there is a boom-bust cycle, right? They don't want things to be consistently moving upwards. They don't actually want consistent upward growth, slow or fast, because in either of these cases, you're not going to be able to make money off of the failures, and you're actually going to have the growth slow down, because the fact that you're not having these kind of drop-off points where the energy is kind of diffused and you can be built back up again, right? So people like this with hedge funds or with anything else that's really connected into the economy as it exists, they don't want something that has consistent growth. For them, consistent growth is stagnation. They need collapse to be part of it. They need intermittent collapse, because that accelerates growth in the short term so that they can make money off of the next collapse.
So it's all then just insincere. Because, again, this is what I wonder with Thiel, is how much he means what he says, or if he's just stupid. One of the really dumb things I thought he said, which had to do with something about the stagnation, the peace times that actually bring about the Antichrist, is he said that the hippies won. Which
they did, because they all own tech companies.
But he didn't mean it like that. I think he meant like the peace and love component.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. The hippies did win, because Peter Thiel is of that ilk, even though he wasn't too young for that, I guess. But
right,
the idea that he said that, the 70s was like the hippie, it's like, no, it wasn't. Like he misunderstands what Manson did entirely when he talked about Manson taking LSD.
The peace and love race war. Yeah.
Yeah. What is he on? I don't get it.
Yeah. So he does extraordinary violence to the Bible.
Okay. Yeah. That's exactly where I wanted to go from here.
Yeah. So one of the ways that he ends up describing the Antichrist explicitly in this Do That interview is he uses Thessalonians 5:3.
Is this so preposterous, what I've just told you, as a broad account of the stagnation that the entire world has submitted for 50 years to peace and safetyism? This is 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety, and we've submitted.
Now he ends up saying it. I don't have the exact quote, but it's something to the tune of, they will use the motto of peace and safety. That's not what it fucking says. It says nothing about a motto. It says nothing about anyone under a banner or anything like that.
Slogan is the word he used. Yeah.
Slogan, thank you. What it says is, for when they say peace and safety, the sudden destruction will come upon them like labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. That and that's the NIV, right? What that's saying isn't, and when they decide that peace and safety is the thing that they are most focused on, no, it's saying when you think you're safe, things will fall apart. Not when your life is dedicated to safety. Not when your life is dedicated to security. But it's also inconsistent because the fact that that's what he fucking wants, at least per the Straussian moment, is he wants a security state. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's bizarre. But... I mean, I have a lot more Bible stuff to go on, but if you have anything to say about the Thessalonians...
I want to keep going on this, especially with the term Antichrist in particular, because first of all, aesthetically, really great term. And what the Antichrist has turned into in the 21st century America is basically like a Marvel movie villain. It's a complete misunderstanding of the Antichrist of the Bible, which only exists it's only spoken one time, or it's only written one time in the entire Bible, and that was the epistles of John. And it's an adjective, not an individual.
Yep.
And it was described it was to describe those who are opposed to Jesus. So this idea that there is some sort of demonic entity, like think about like Constantine, which is an awesome movie, by the way, where they're trying to like bring about the Antichrist, and they portray it as like the son of the devil, which is also like nowhere in the Bible, right?
Right.
So Peter Thiel is talking about the Antichrist and purports to be a Catholic. In fact, he strong-armed J.D. Vance into converting to Catholicism and leaving Usha to be damned to hell for eternity because she is still Hindi. So I mean, it's how serious does Peter Thiel believe in God? Does he even read the Bible? He throws out a couple of books here and there, and that I think that's supposed to impress people. But what do you make of Peter Thiel's theology?
It's unconvincing to me, but the problem is that I know very few people. As someone who interacts with very many Christians on a day-to-day basis, I know very few people whose theology I find convincing, and not necessarily from an argumentative level, but from in terms of their faith and their understanding of the text and things like that kind of all, right? Like I do think that most Christians just are fundamentally not Christians. And I think that's probably true for most religions. It's kind of a cultural thing, and because of the fact that these are oriented around churches, church-going Christians sometimes are the least Christian of all because of the fact that they are working off of pointed misreadings by other people, right? By a pastor or whatnot.
Joel Osteen puts on a hell of a show, okay? So lay off.
And so It's difficult for me to say if his Christianity is purely cynical, and that's why he has all of these insane misreadings, or if he just has the wrong guy that he's listening to, which is so often the case. And there's nothing about Thiel's actions or Thiel's expressed beliefs that makes me feel like he's a genuine Christian, if I'm going to know true Scotsman Christians, I guess. But I don't know. I think inconsistency in this realm is kind of par for the course, you know? I don't know, what are your thoughts? Do you think this guy's a Christian? What do you think he believes in his heart of hearts?
I think this is where people who are Christians today, when they say, I believe in this thing, it's like, how can you say you don't? How can you say, no, you don't? It's kind of like, and we were talking about this earlier this week, that it's kind of like trans identity in a way. And that if someone says they are this thing, you can't look into their heart, you can't look into their mind. You know, the liberal way of dealing with it, I guess, the woke way of dealing with it is being like, hey, you are what you say you are, and I will take you at your word, and I will respect you for that. Which Peter Thiel, I don't think, is a fan of that kind of attitude. And so the woke thing to do with Peter Thiel's Christianity, his faith, and be like, yeah, sure, you're a Catholic, you are what you say you are. But at least with not all, but some trans people, there are ways in which you can verify that faith, or at least display that faith that you have in your own belief of yourself, which is to become that thing that you say you are, physically. Someone's faith is a lot harder to determine. I guess you have to live in a particular way. You'd have to live like Christ. And if those are the metrics by which we are judging Peter Thiel's faith, absolutely fucking not. He is the Antichrist.
And then again, and this can be both, you know, his expression of what Christianity is in this interview, when he talks about nature, right, is that because people are fallen, we need to transcend. And he does this weird modern conflation, but we need to transcend our nature, which he conflates with we need to transcend nature as such.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament. And so, if you and there is a word in which, a sense in which, the way I understand, the Judeo-Christian inspiration is, it is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things. And, and the closest thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen, and that's the natural thing in a Christian sense, is that you're messed up. And that's true. But, there's some ways that, with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that.
Yes, I remember being like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, and so this obsession with overcoming things and conquering things is what he thinks Christianity is.
Right.
And so in those terms, he's a Christian if we're willing to entirely redefine that term for his use.
He's a fucking Groyper Christian, like Nick Fuentes guy, basically.
Right. And just to work off this whole nature thing and the misuse or non-use or mixed use of language, he says this thing, and of course this is all on purpose because he wants to get to the shit that he's saying about Greta and whatnot and green religion or whatever. He points out this idea that the word nature is never used in the Old Testament. And first off, I will point out that no English word is ever used in the Old Testament. But further, for those of us that are not readers of the Bible, just want to do a quick walk through Old Testament relationship to nature real quick. Let's start with Genesis 1, where God creates the world in an ordered and purposeful way, and then gives humanity dominion, not domination, but dominion over the world, in order to, in my mind, act as stewards over it. But sure, it could be exploitation as well. Regardless, that seems like a mentioning of a relationship to nature. From there, the earth is constantly referred to as being good. Right? Throughout the whole Old Testament, the earth is called good. That seems like a positive valuation to me. The promised land, before people go to it, is still the promised land, right? So it is a non-political unit that is to become a political unit, sure. It's going to become a polis, but the promised land is the land of milk and honey. It is a fertile place. It is a place of abundance. It is a positive, natural state that people are looking for to get to live in. When you do something wrong, the earth vomits you out in the Old Testament. During the Sabbath, you are supposed to have this resting of the land during the Sabbath year, right? And during the Jubilee. Like you have these constant, and you have rules in Deuteronomy and through Leviticus about landowners leaving parts of their crop alone so that they can feed the poor or so that they can regrow. You're not supposed to cut down the fruit trees during a siege, which could just be smart war tactics, but could be, maybe don't use up all your fucking food. Maybe don't nuke the environment just because of the fact that you need it during this moment. There's constant personification of nature where the earth is clapping and singing and shouting out the glory of God. And lastly, God's favorite punishments are droughts and locusts and disease and famine and things which are produced through a connection between moral order and ecological balance. So I would say that maybe the Old Testament talks about nature a little bit. And lastly, in Job 7 through 10, it's stated that you should ask the animals and they will teach you, right? That's how you're supposed to respond to your world falling apart, is look to nature and it will give you the things that you need to follow, that you need to do in order to survive. So maybe our goal as Christians or Jews or Muslims or whatever the fuck, or anyone else, but if you want to use the Old Testament, should be to, like I said at the very beginning, be a steward of nature, because that seems like the argument throughout the entirety of the fucking Old Testament.
So what is Peter Thiel's faith then, if anything at all? What
domination?
Domination.
It's transcending one's quote unquote nature by transcending nature and by conquering yourself and others. That's it.
Yeah, it pretty simple as
by becoming the sovereign. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No. Yeah. Fuck these people, dude. I mean, like, really, like, there's nothing. Does he ever make a salient point in your mind? Is there anything he contributes? When Douthat, he really just pins him down and basically says, are you sure you're not the Antichrist? And Peter Thiel hems and haws and can't really convincingly say, no, I am not. Or maybe he never truly considered that he could be that thing. I don't know.
There's a wrongful conflation between Satan and the serpent in Genesis, right? But working off of this adjectival idea, right, that there are antichrists, that you can act in an anti-Christian way, right? What does the serpent say to Eve when he's trying to tempt her? He ends up saying, "Oh, do this and ye shall be as gods. Right?
Mhm.
So if his entire Christianity is predicated on a conquering of oneself, of nature, of yada, 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 and he's using the political legacy of people like Schmidt in order to say that, or even Girard, though I like Girard from the little bit that I've read at this point, I think is really interesting, that sovereignty is supposed to be kind of the portion of the nation state that becomes like God, that maybe his Christianity is in fact the Christianity of the Antichrist.
That sounds right to me. And I wonder if he even knows it. One of the things I find endlessly fascinating about these tech oligarchs that live amongst us is they're not like the oligarchs of yore. They're not like the robber barons of yore, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, because they don't build anything. They leave us with nothing. They are not building theaters. They are not building museums. They are not building schools, except for, I guess, the University of Austin. So I take that back. They instead are building mind palaces. That's the only kind of thing they're constructing, which are these fucking stupid ideas. I mean, Peter Thiel is credited with the Dark Enlightenment.
Right.
Which, also, to bring it back to this idea that in the 21st century, that was like the death of the Enlightenment when 9/11 happened. It's like, no, that was the fucking Holocaust, dude. I thought we all understood that. Like, I learned that at a very young age, that the Enlightenment ended with the Holocaust. So to skip that entirely. Anyway, he's a Nazi. Of course he doesn't think that. But yeah, you have Curtis fucking Yarvin. Did you read that New Yorker profile?
No, I did not, but I'm
very fun.
Relatively familiar with him.
Very fun. So you have Curtis Yarvin. You have the Weinstein brothers. That's their last name. I forget. Sometimes the Jewish names all get kind of confusing to me, even as a Jew.
Yeah. People say both of them, and it really confuses and irks me, and I should have an answer. I think it's Steen.
Well, Weinstein. The Berenstain brothers. Who are also morons, by the way.
Yes.
And
I've been reading that geometric unity paper. It is.
That's his explain everything theorem.
Yeah. I don't know physics and math. Though I
doesn't sound like he does either, right?
No, I don't think he does. But sorry, go on.
Well, I was just thinking how Terrence Howard's physics makes more sense than Weinstein's.
Dude, yes.
But
it's all digital reduction, man. Yeah.
You have a Bronze Age pervert, Justin Murphy. I think that's where he gets his theology from. Is Justin Murphy?
Yeah, that would make sense.
So basically, people who are complete and utter frauds. And I think he's built these characters. He's built this mind palace around him. In order to convince himself that, no, you are not the Antichrist, Peter. No, you are not, Peter. And yet, I'll criticize him and I'll say, if someone tells me Peter Thiel is smart or Elon Musk is smart, I'll say, no, they're fucking stupid. But then I'll say, but I'm terrified of what they can do. And it's just, you don't have to be smart to run the world, it seems.
No. That's
not how it works.
Not at all. It's I mean, it's the racist group chat type of thing that kind of predicates so much of his thought is
that's that is, it's like the Frankfurt School, but it's the racist group chat.
Yeah, and I mean that really kind of is what it is, where he he invites all these various people in order to kind of bolster his ideas so that he can say fucked up things, and everyone kind of like nods along with it, or even like ecstatically agrees, and that's the whole point of it, echo chamber, blah blah blah. Yeah. Also, fuck Justin Murphy, dude. Oh my god. It's funny that I would want to remove him more than any of these people with actual power. Like he bugs me that much.
I mean, you can buy a gun.
I can.
Yeah,
I can for any alternative use.
For just for target practice, for hunting. What was I going to say before
I've already threatened him indirectly online too many times.
You could beat the fuck out of him, dude. You could beat him up
It would be easy. Yeah.
That's what we got. That's the thing. The digital world, we need to start. The future needs to be. I like the idea of like the Greek philosophers just like walking around in togas and talking. And I think we just need to bring back the public square more, and subsequently fighting or throwing your piss pots at people, because they would throw shit at each other. I really think we need to mix, like, it's like chess boxing. We need to bring that element to the discourse, where it's like, you might be smarter than me, just barely, but I'll knock you the fuck out. How about that?
Yeah,
we need some of that.
I mean, sure, we know what happened to Socrates in the end. Thiel certainly does. But
someone give Thiel that idea.
But the thing that really made Socrates able to be the philosopher that he was is he was jacked as shit. Like he could afford to be that annoying.
The secret is little boys. I've been thinking a lot about Peter Thiel seems to be informed by pop culture, like I said, Back to the Future, the Jetsons, Lord of the Rings seems to figure in these people's minds a lot.
Mithril Capital, etc. Yeah,
and Durrell, fucking Lucky Palmer. That's the dude I want to beat up.
Moving to New Zealand.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
But I was thinking about art that maybe informed my worldview, and who knows if no matter what I read, I was always going to believe what I believe today, just because I don't know, it feels intuitive in a lot of ways.
Sure.
But I think a lot about Cat's Cradle, Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And what was it called? Ice 9, which was like this Oppenheimer figure. I think his name might have been Oppenheimer in the book.
It might have been. I don't remember. But yeah.
Creates some sort of technology that, like, the second like this thing hits water, it turns the whole world into ice, and he made it just because he could, And he was a psychopath in this book. I got to reread it. Maybe we'll do like a fun little episode about it, whatever. But I think about how that kind of stuff informs my thinking, and that's how I see these things. That's how I see technology. Is you don't have to do it. It doesn't need to be done just because it can. And I think about Japanese craftsmanship like that, where they'll have people who have been making soy sauce or like specialty bonsai scissors the same way for hundreds of years. And they don't see any reason in changing it. It's just about the perfection of the craft. And I respect that so much more than I call it like the Atariism philosophy, which is like this chasing this high score that you can never, there's no end to it. There's just like an infinite high score. And, and that's a disease. That's insanity. And I feel like these people are plagued by that. That is their god, is a high score.
Yeah. And it fits into his kind of fixation on Girard, which is that he really does think that desire is mimetic, that it is based on a rivalry because someone else wants something, you have to want it, and because I do still kind of sit with this quasi-accelerationist thought where because something can be done, someone will do it. Right. So if you have that kind of thought and you have this kind of worldview based off of this mimetic desire, then you will probably be pushed to, feel you need to do something before someone else does because it's a threat. The difference with, people making, these bonsai scissors or, even like, well, actually the making sourdough in your home thing might be an arms race in itself. But this desire to do things that are, I don't even want to use the word traditional because that has too much political baggage with it. But do things in a slow way because the slow way is the better way, or in a kind of a niche way because the niche way is the better way, and avoiding the pitfalls that other people are falling into rather than racing into them because you want to fall in first, is just a difference in worldview. And I would agree with you that it is a better worldview, generally speaking. But if you are totally fixated on, finance, if you're totally fixated on a security state, if you're totally fixated on, this conquering exploitative power, then you're necessarily going to think that because it can be done, you need to do it because someone else is going to.
Yeah, that sounds like an awful way to live life, huh?
Horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping up with the Musks or whatever.
He has a slave sex island. I gotta have a slave sex island.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, and so I guess like this is the last question I'll ask, and it's incredibly speculative. Is Peter Thiel happy?
No. I mean, I think you can just read that off of his face, right? Where and I don't like to throw this like, oh man, he's on drugs thing at people because everyone's on drugs, and also you can't. Yeah, I mean, I'm on drugs right now, but that man's on drugs. Yeah. Like he the sweatiest, most nervous person on earth, and it could just be that he's like boofing Vyvanse, but I think that he probably feels extraordinarily alien. I think that he feels isolated, and I think that a big part of him writing the Straussian moment when he did about the content that he wrote it about, I think if he was just being totally cynical, he would have found a different framing for it rather than 9/11. I think that he is a deeply paranoid person who has let things like this fester for a very long time, or else the least creative person in the world. It could be both, and which would lead to his fixation on one thing for that long. And so I think that he is a deeply unhappy, self-alienated person who can only ever feel any kind of happiness based off of the idea of trying to transcend the person that is making him miserable, which is himself. And he can only do it by making himself more miserable. by continuing this rat race, not to be too like Gen X about it.
Peter, listen to me.
We love you, man. I mean, in a way, in like a Christian brother.
I don't know. Peter, hear me out, all right? There's no amount of twinks in the world that are going to fill your hole. Okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, like metaphorically. And the other way too. I don't know which way he goes. And you can throw them off as many balconies in Miami as you want. But true happiness is in sacrifice.
And
like
your sacrifice.
Yes,
not
no. Self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice. So the next time you have to hook up one of your blood bags from your like adolescent blood slaves, fill it with hemlock, and you'll find real happiness. And so will the world.
Yeah. And I would add on just a quote by Diogenes, which is, "The only place to piss in a rich man's house is in his face."
Yes. Жил на свете ровный парень. Звали Николай Рептайл. Почему его так звали, так никто и не поймет. Ростом был полкилометра, весом 20 килограмм. Заходил в свою квартиру он обычно по частям. Засовывал